All right, welcome everyone. We will give just a few seconds for people to file in before we get our webinar started. See people starting to file in, so just a few seconds, we'll get started. All right, looks like we got some people in here, so we will go ahead and get this webinar started. Thank you all for joining us today. Today's webinar is Optimizing the Training Epicenter for Community Recreation. Our presenters are Active Solutions founder Brian Green and Education Director Andrew Gavigan. They will be discussing how to optimize your facility to support changes in demand for strength, movement, and recovery training spaces. During their conversation today, if you have any questions, please send those on over in the Q&A feature. We'll be sure to get those answered for you. At this time, I will go ahead and hand it off to Brian and Andrew. You all have the floor.
Pardon me. Thank you very much. As mentioned, my name is Andrew Gavigan. I'm the Director of Education here at Active Solutions. 17 years as a personal trainer in our industry, and I have an education in behavioral economics or behavioral science. So I use that at Active Solutions to help our community apply various changes to their facility, to their programming in order to help their community. And our founder, Brian Green, has many more years than I do in the industry. I'll allow Brian to introduce himself.
Yes, thank you, Andrew. Many, many more years and more grades, but no, super excited to be here. And yes, I'm the founder of Active Solutions, and we are a company focused on the design of space and the supply of functional training solutions for them.
Yes, sir, that is us. We are always available, of course, for anybody in our industry to reach out if you guys have any questions or need any help. And hopefully we can supply you with some great insights from our experience at Active Solutions and throughout the rest of our career in the industry. So one of the things that we do regularly here at Active is we help to design functional training spaces. So as most of us know, functional training has become more than a trend at this point. It's a staple now in our industry. We have to supply spaces, equipment, and programming that match that trend. And we like to do that, again, by creating more open space. A lot of our clubs are taking out part of their cardio, a small percentage to a medium percentage of their cardio equipment to allow for these open spaces. Not only do they look cool, not only do they provide great community workouts and a place for people to connect, but they also allow for a variety of different modalities. They allow for great storage of awesome equipment, and they allow us to impact different people at different stages in their readiness to change. For example, different types of modalities people can do for older adults. You can do boot camps for the teenagers, or people can simply do their strength training workouts on their own. Now, all those different modalities, of course, sometimes require different equipment. Whatever the case may be, we like to design spaces that reduce friction. What we mean by friction is we make it easier for our customers, our members, our community to approach, both emotionally, mentally, and physically. We want to make things more accessible. We want to make them less intimidating, easier to physically navigate, easier to navigate programming. And we do that in a number of ways. And one of those ways is simply creating a clean, organized space. And this is where Brian developed Active. This is what he developed it for. What you see here, for example, are some of our storage solutions. And what we do with those storage solutions is we help to take a space that might be cluttered with extra treadmills, there might be dumbbells on the floor. We create space to work. We create a direct path to whatever our customer's goal is or our member's goal is at the time. And we make it easy for them to put those things back. And Brian, maybe you can describe a little bit about what the impetus was for creating the gym rack line of storage and why we got into focusing on design first at Active.
Well, there's there's no shortage of great fitness equipment in the marketplace. So that wasn't necessarily the problem to solve so much as really looking at space. This is something that we as a company are passionate about. I'm personally passionate about. I think that these open or movement spaces really create what we often refer to as an energy epicenter for whatever the environment is. And, historically, often movement spaces have been relegated to maybe a group training studio or segregated in some way. And, really, as Andrew said, it's not really a trend anymore. It's a staple that movement spaces now have found their way much more broadly onto the regular fitness floor, or even outdoors, or adjacent spaces where we might have still energy, but lower energy spaces where we can focus on recovery or mind-body wellness. So it's a very exciting time. But the impetus was really to solve for how do you create and define these particular spaces. In some cases, you may specialize them into a more focused, single focus modality, such as a Pilates space or a HIIT training space. And in other cases, based upon the total available space you have, you may need to make it much more conducive for multimodality. And that's something we're particularly good at. So really fashioning the space around whatever your unique constituency is our expertise. And the community recreation space in particular is something that we're really fond of, excited about. It's a multi-generational opportunity. So with that comes quite a few challenges in terms of how you make it accommodating and accessible. But it's really, when done well, an exciting opportunity to engage members or guests in fitness.
And I think that to even better define that, my experience being at Active for quite a few years now, and again, my time in the industry, the space, not to mention the people who work there, the trainers, the people at the front desk, all create an experience. And that experience is just as important and just as valuable as any dumbbell or kettlebell or bench that you can put in a facility. And I think that probably stands to be even more true at community recreation centers or campus recreation centers for that matter. So when we create these spaces, of course, part of the goal is to create a space that's clean and easy to manage, but it's also to create a space for people to come together to work out, for people to get motivated. Some people, of course, get motivated by others. They get motivated by competition or by example. And some people, of course, need a more general approach. But when you create a space that allows for all of those options, you're going to be able to leverage that more. And that's something that we find important in the industry, and our clients and colleagues have also found that to be incredibly important. So that being said, when you provide that space for people to meet and that healthy competition to hopefully drive them and motivate them, you're going to end up developing better relationships and delivering better results. Now, we like to step in and help our colleagues and clients create not only a space where they can store their equipment and utilize shelving and utilize all those accessories, but we also try to encompass everything from the flooring to the walls to the colors. And I could talk about this all day. There's great research that shows that a lunchroom on a construction site was painted pink, and that reduced the amount of aggression and fights over a few month period simply by painting the walls pink. So the point being, the way you design a space affects every single aspect of how people act in that space. So I want to pass it over to Brian again to talk more about how we incorporate things like flooring and like paint or design, or even, as you can see in this picture here, branding and logos to go with our clients' community and our clients' programming and the things that they provide their members.
Well, I think the opportunity in creating dynamic training spaces, open training spaces, is really one to affect social connectedness. And that's really critical. I think that what we have experienced what our industry is experiencing is really just an evolution of the fact that although health and wellness and sports science are, always growing, they're not really necessarily growing at an exponential rate. We're not moving any differently than we ever particularly have. What we recognize is that there's all sorts of fantastic instruments in terms of, small format tools such as dumbbells and kettlebells, or large equipment such as treadmills and single selectorized stations. All these components help people sort of get in shape. But how do you help people really energize and stay motivated towards a continuous commitment to exercise as an integration of lifestyle? And so we think that it's become very clear that the social element of this, as well as really effective guidance, which I know we'll talk a lot about, are critical to that stickiness, to creating spaces that people want to come to. And although there is the working out, we can debate the merits of that term working and how that psychologically affects those approaching a training session, if that's not something that they're super excited about, feeling like they need to do more work, right? But ultimately what we're getting at is creating spaces and experiences, Andrew said, that invite people in, that are inclusive and that are motivating. And so he's mentioned flooring and wall treatments and other elements. Certainly interior design plays a role. I think most importantly, functional design is the most critical, and that is affected by proper flooring selection. Flooring is equipment today, right? And depending upon the type of movement that's being done there, if we're jumping or if we're doing, floor-based movements, that really has to be a big consideration of the type of flooring materials that we select for the environment. Storage, suspension, these are critical elements of facilitating movement in training spaces, storing the various different modality or products that will facilitate different formats for exercise, different modalities. It's smart to be more precise with those decisions today. And we spend a lot of time focused on how to store products well and how to make them easy to take on and off the shelf. Suspension is an incredibly important category, because with suspension, you can connect things overhead, from straps to punching bags to rope pulls and things of that nature. Yet if it's done well, you can really preserve the floor space and the movement space for those participants. So all of these factors are specific to the functional design. And as opposed to yesteryear, where you buy a bunch of different storage elements or solutions that maybe you piecemealed over time, smarter storage solutions and suspension training solutions, for that matter, exist today, where they're more modular. They can grow as your programming grows, or they can appeal in different ways based upon, again, your constituency, whether you have youth fitness or active adult membership base. All of these factors go into informing the way that we approach a space before we ever begin to equip it. And that's really the critical factor. Defining space, defining movement space is certainly the obvious problem to solve moving forward, and rebalancing these floors are critical. And to do that well, you have to start with really the end in mind and think about who and how you're trying to accommodate those participants and their needs.
So we analyze the space. We want to functionally use that space better, but then we also want that space to be approachable and create its own and become its own tool for us and our community to use. Then, if we can, we apply guidance, entertainment, things that continue to bring people in, continue to provide safe, efficient feedback, and then in hand provide a better outcome for that particular member or person or part of our community. Whatever that outcome is supposed to be, whether it's a change in fitness level, a change in health, or simply a place to go to feel good about themselves. So one of the things we do while we're considering designing these spaces is where and how we present guidance. And we can do this both by hiring team members who are professionals, or we can even mitigate that a little bit by applying some of our digital guidance. And we can utilize both, obviously. In most cases, we're going to want that. We want the human element, but then we want to curb our costs perhaps by utilizing some digital guidance. So right here, what you see are these little bays that we have. We've utilized the space that otherwise would have been taken up by 4 treadmills. And now we can have 4+ people working out, getting direct feedback, and creating a little bit of excitement. We also provide some digital guidance on the wall. What you see here is one of our platforms called Active TV. But this platform, for example, is going to provide various circuit or linear training programs. Safety, my clients can follow even if I have a trainer in the room. A little bit of feedback as if you were using a mirror, but of course, even better because now I can see a professional doing the exercise at all times, even if my trainer is speaking to somebody else or they're standing behind me. And then I also get to enjoy the novelty and the excitement of having that guidance. When you apply design to the floors, to the walls, to the way you put the medicine balls away, you also create inherent spaces and reduce friction and reduce barriers to entry. By barriers to entry, we mean I step into a room, I'm a novice at exercise, I don't know exactly what a piece of equipment is for or what exercises I'm supposed to do today. I can look at 2 things. I have some markings on the floor that are somewhat intuitive. I know I can go into one of these spaces. I see an exercise up on the TV with that medicine ball. I know I can do that exercise. And then I also know that the next screen in 45 seconds is the next exercise I'm going to do. I've got the equipment, I've got the guidance, I got the spaces marked out, and I have permission from my community to involve myself in that workout. Those are equally as important, and those are guided not just by the culture developed at this facility, but by the equipment and the design of the space. Design, culture, the way things look, they all go hand in hand, and we're learning that more and more as a industry, but also I can tell you from my perspective as a behavioral economics expert. When we utilize digital guidance, we also get the opportunity to reduce our overhead costs, again, on someone who creates programming, somebody who leads programming. We have, for example, some community centers that will run classes that are guided by professionals. And in the slower hours, they'll provide classes like this, for example, where the community members can simply enter on their own and utilize that intuitive guidance to get through their own workout in a safe way. Now, Brian developed these platforms for a number of reasons. We have some people, like we talked about earlier, who thrive on that community setting and that competition. And then we have some people who thrive on the safety of protecting themselves from what they think is happening with other people watching them work out. For example, that novice we talked about earlier. So it's important to provide a variety of options. Brian, will you talk a little bit more perhaps about the difference between that group guidance and that individual sort of on-demand guidance?
Sure. And I'd love to take credit for everything that Active has developed, but clearly yourself and several other fantastic teammates have been a big part of the solutions that we brought to market here. You know, programming for any space is absolutely critical. It's really the intention for the space. Sometimes a program for a space is just the situation of the space, not necessarily what we more tightly define today as guidance for the space, and whether that, as Andrew has said, is done in a live fashion or through a augmented or digital, you know, completely digital fashion. We are building solutions across the board to facilitate that, because at the end of the day, although movement and open space modalities, you know, really are facilitating a fantastic opportunity for socialization, for energy, for engagement, there is still a large gap between what the layperson understands to be the best way to utilize these spaces. At least, the higher percentages. It's becoming much more common for, folks to have a greater awareness around movement-based modalities. COVID, for all of its negative effects, also created an environment where so many had to get creative at home, and they had to find ways to use what they had and the space that they had to work with it. And so that created a much greater awareness around just what you could do with small format, tools, from bands to balls to mats to kettlebells, you name it, without massive reliance upon, large format treadmills and other strength training equipment that are nice to have, but not necessarily going to get you into a socialized environment for these spaces. So again, we've all seen legions of treadmills at health clubs and community recreation centers, very little engagement between participants together, right? And so we know that, socialization often also increases accountability, and it leads us back into the program. It leads us back into how we are utilizing these spaces to get the most, the most benefit, which is certainly a socialization, but certainly we're there to exercise and get benefit for health and wellness. And in that perspective, digital guidance now gives us a sort of an opportunity to take any space and make sure there is a path. And so, as Andrew was saying, there's two primary uses within open spaces that people are affecting. Operators are either looking at creating communal spaces so that there are multiple participants at one time being supported, or as Andrew showed earlier, there are kiosk options, or what we'd call personalized opportunities to get a one-on-one experience. Those are all critical for not only the guidance of what the particular exercise of the day is, for what your choices are in that realm, but also the variety of what you may want to do tomorrow or the next day. The digital guidance allows us a flexibility in many cases that we can not only alter curriculum much easier and at a lower cost, but we can also program, in fairness, what people seem to react most to, and that is sort of someone speaking to them within their own tribe, so to speak. So whether you're an active adult or senior population, you might be more inspired by somebody who looks to be of a similar age and has achieved fantastic result through a commitment to wellness. You might be more inspired by that person than you might be a 20-something super energetic person that again may be doing fantastic things, but maybe less focused in terms of some of the modalities that you're interested in. So I think by having a digital opportunity, we can vary both the content in terms of the modality, but also in terms of the face or the interface of the instructor.
And that is a good point. One of the biggest barriers to entry is people's fear of possibly not getting something right. So if you can, that's why getting on a treadmill is sometimes simple. But if we can reduce the confusion or the uncertainty by providing certain guidance, especially guidance that's targeted, and when you have platforms that are easy to manipulate, and you have design aspects that are modular and easier to change, or even a functional space that's easy to present different types of modalities in, you're going to have more variety. You can't have every variety in the world, and too many choices is not a good solution either. But that's where you guys come in as professionals. You take those spaces where you have the opportunity to create those different variables and you utilize them to the best of your ability. That being said, changing modalities and having specific areas for specific modalities is equally as important, especially when it comes to things like recovery. And I always find this a bit of a catch-22. Perhaps it's ironic. As trainers, we understand how important it is to do recovery. We want our clients to do recovery. But often our clients or members will come, they'll take a class, they'll do the hard part, they'll do the part that's fun, but they won't do the easiest, most simple part, which is sit down, touch your toes, or use a hypervolt to massage your legs. So one of the ways you can help, again, is to create a space that has its own message. And if a space suggests, even literally, you can see from this image, quite literally has a message, mindset is everything, but at least is a dedicated space. You can see behind me, we have one of our recovery bays where this type of behavior is supposed to happen. It's more likely to happen. That's one thing we've learned through our experiences at Active, is if you create the space, it starts to dictate what is supposed to happen there. If you create a space that allows a broad spectrum of healthy and wellness related things to happen, it's going to happen there. This is our recovery space. It allows for an individual to step aside. Even if it's 2 feet away from the gym floor, it still presents an area that is dedicated to a certain type of behavior. Yoga class, for example, well-designed, isolated, clean. If this is the behavior that's supposed to happen in this room, we can set that behavior by designing the space or simply by lighting a candle and changing the music. I like to present to some of the younger fitness professionals when we're doing certifications. I ask them, what's the difference between a push-up and chaturanga? The answer is there's a candle in the room when you're doing a chaturanga. And of course, I'm being a little facetious. A chaturanga is the yoga push-up. Your intention is what's different. Your body moving up and down is the same, but your intention is what's different. You can change that intention simply by designing a room a certain way. And you can design a room in a way that you can change that intention throughout the day if you're strategic. This is one of our clients. It's actually a physical therapist. So they provide a number of modalities, including massage, chiropractic, and Brian has more experience with this image here. Brian, you want to talk about how they're utilizing this space?
Well, I think the theme here, yes, is specialization, right, Andrew? And so I do think that operators moving forward need to be more mindful of a greater emphasis on specialization within the movement spaces. So what does that mean? We touched on it earlier in the call where we're talking about movement spaces finding their way onto the fitness floor versus, previously being just relegated into group studio spaces, or you're seeing open spaces. This happens to be an environment for physical therapy, but it is integrating corrective exercise and post-injury recovery and all of those themes that are so important today. We're seeing these previously siloed aspects of health and wellness and recovery all come into the same larger facility spaces. But to do that well, the best practice is specialization where possible. So as Andrew was showing earlier, separate adjunct recovery spaces where I mentioned also that a lower energy movement orientation is being conducted. Creating a space that feels like it was designed for that intention really creates a tremendously deeper experience, something that I think that the participant really appreciates and will look forward to coming back to, because it looks like it was again designed specifically for them and maybe more deeply for the purpose. So in this case, for recovery, whether we're talking about pre-exercise, preparation, or post-exercise, rejuvenation, we're talking about a big category today in our industry that has to be planned for. And for instance, what you're seeing on the screen here is, some great equipment from a partner of ours in Hyperice. But what you're seeing is a area that is specific to myofascial release work. So whether you're using these percussion type devices or you're using foam rollers or any of that stuff, we characterize that as a lower energy modality. Certainly, if this participant was sitting here or laying on the floor doing this and somebody right next to him was rocking out to something and really swinging a kettlebell pretty heavily here, that might seem a little counterintuitive for the type of environment we're creating. So that's an example of where we're trying to relegate spaces. We talk a lot about energy zones, but we're trying to relegate spaces not just to one specific modality, but to a grouping of either higher intensity or lower intensity work. Did we lose you, Andrew?
I wanted to stay on this image because just to make a quick point, this quite literally has a message that says recovery, but of equal importance, perhaps even more important, the sectioned off area, the equipment that's immediately available and easily accessible, and the guidance that shows you how to do it provides even more of a message than the actual words written on the map there. So all of those things combined, we have found are incredibly important to not only provide a great wellness service to your members, but give your members a sense of accomplishment, success, and a little bit of autonomy, the ability to manage their own workouts. Those are all important for what you could call customer success or member satisfaction. Okay. So you also have the ability in these open spaces, right, to be more inclusive of every type of person, whether it's a special modality of exercise, the different age groups that we want to utilize our facility, or the different fitness levels. Again, this image shows a number of different pieces of equipment, open space, myofascial equipment in the corner, stability balls, we have a rope pull, and we have a suspension strap, all within a contained area. These are important, especially now. I've noticed from my perspective, again, 17 years, that we are trying to provide service to more different types of people, which, as we all, I think, can agree, is going to make a more positive impact on the community as a whole. These are one of, Brian, I don't know who this is. Maybe you can elaborate on this, but we have a lot of users who have a wide variety of member base. And when they install these open functional spaces, they're going to have a lot more variables that they can leverage in order to provide to different people.
Yeah. Well, inclusiveness and safety are critical in these environments. We've talked a lot about theming, but we need to talk about, again, how people feel welcome. And so it's deeper than simply, the energy or the intention for the actual activity. It's also making sure that, we have spaces that are less intimidating. So much as the trend, for instance, for these open spaces evolved in health clubs, so many of them became, if you will, sort of mini CrossFits, right? And to some folks, CrossFit's a bad word or a negative connotation, and I don't believe that's the case, but it does certainly invite or create a more industrial look, a heavy load intention, and that's not necessarily what we would define inclusive for the greater population, a multi-general population. It's not to say that everybody can't participate in CrossFit, but CrossFit is really just one modality, one really type of training experience within the functional realm. And so approachability is critical. Well, here is a great image on the screen. I mean, we're talking about boxing here. Well, we've all seen pretty aggressive boxing studios. I'm not sure that we characterize this space as overly aggressive. It seems to be accommodating. I think anybody could hit that bag as hard as they'd like to hit it. But in this case, boxing is something that can be fun and, available to anybody, right? And so it's important that we start with a broader outlook for who we're trying to accommodate. And then there's no reason you can't get, into some of these otherwise stereotypically aggressive modalities, but you got to make them inviting. You got to make it feel as though everybody's welcome to participate. One of the things that I love about the community recreation space is that there's an opportunity for not just multi-generational accommodation, but within the same moment, meaning that parents and their children, depending upon the ages and the parameters of the facility, are exercising in many cases more together today. And in community recreation, that's a really unique opportunity where families could come together, depending again upon the modality and everybody's time. But certainly there are more opportunities on property within a community recreation space often than there are in a traditional health club space or boutique studio space. And to me, that's an exciting opportunity to create space again that will accommodate a wide variety of sort of interest level, but a cross participation, one specific to family, which I think we all are always trying to get as much family time as possible. So.
Yeah, great point. And I think we keep repeating the theme here that accessibility, approachability, barriers to entry related both to the physical aspects of a space, to the culture of that space, but also to the design of that space. A weight is a weight. I think we know that 3 pounds always equals 3 pounds, but if it's a sharp, chalky, rusty metal object compared to maybe a softer looking, easy to hold object, people are going to approach it differently. And depending on, of course, who we want to approach our facility, we got to keep that in mind. Now, beyond that, there is a lot of tangible functional aspects to how you create a space or recreate a space. And one of the things that we also have found to be incredibly important, and this is where I think Brian's humble genius really comes into play, is we create spaces that are completely modular and adaptable. So everything you see here, every single one of those shelves, for example, this is in one of our gym racks setups, I can take out by hand with 0 tools. Lifts out, can adjust up and down, left or right. But more importantly, the whole structure itself is not does not have to be bolted to the ground. Why is that important to me in my facility? Well, first of all, it changes the whole dynamic of installing it initially. I don't have to get surveys of my foundation in order to bolt things down. But more importantly, in a few years, when there's different trends or we need to create a new novel presentation to try to entice new members, I can redesign this whole space with just a couple of wrenches. I don't have to take anything out of the floor or out of the wall. So modularity, adaptability is important. We know it's important with our programming, right? 10 years ago, I may have been teaching Zumba. Now I'm teaching high fitness. They're all equally as important. The only thing that has changed is people's perception or interest in that product.
I think that's a fantastic point. I mean, we are always, we certainly want to create an end user experience that is engaging and all the, for all the reasons we discussed, but we're also very sensitive to the operator's perspective, the costs associated with building these spaces and really their defendability and their, cost of ownership and lifetime value. So what Andrew's talking about is that the one thing that we know for certain is that within these spaces are going to continue to evolve, whether it's a new product that, is driving a new workout type, or just really, again, the variety that is possible within these spaces. You've got to remain flexible. And so that does mean simple things as being able to more easily change your configuration or change your equipment, or your storage for these handhelds without having to buy all new equipment, without having to constantly budget for, some very significant capital expenditure. That's one of the opportunities that when operators really embrace an open floor plan and smart accommodation for space and for storage and suspension and things like this, that you're going to be able to adapt a lot easier and a lot faster as changes come more quickly, and they will. So the goal for all of us, anybody who's ever had the good fortune or challenge to operate a fitness, facility, is that things change and trends change, and the ability to keep up with that is critical. We're all trying to make sure we can message to a much larger audience that is available, that today is really still remaining fractional in terms of those that are willing and, current participants in exercise. That's the challenge, but I like to think of it as the ultimate opportunity.
Ultimate opportunity. And of course, our objective in our space is to help as many people in the community become healthier as possible. That benefits us personally. It benefits our families. That's our ultimate goal. You make things more approachable. You make them easier to access, both perceptually and physically. And then you make it less impactful in a bad way on the facility and the operators themselves. That is our main objective, right? So that's all we have. We're open to some questions. And of course, you guys can always reach out to any of us here at Active with any of your questions. But we'd be happy to take a few right now, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Great presentation, Andrew and Brian. Great points, great photos. We do have some follow-up questions for you. One of the big topics right now in the community recreation industry is just engaging their members and participants and getting them back into facilities and creating community again. So what type of equipment improvements or space design will engage participants further in their programs?
Brian, go ahead.
Well, I think that's a terrific point. I don't know that anybody has a greater advantage, if you will, than community recreation to bring back people faster within one's community. But communities take many forms today. Exercise space within the community recreation area is, has traditionally followed the path of what larger health clubs have done, and they've become sort of variations or in many cases a mirror effect of that. And I think, moving forward, that's a missed opportunity in the sense that the multi-generational audience or constituency of community recreation is the perfect environment for creating this welcome back, this, increased comfort with re-socialization, dare I say. And so you've got to be ready for that. And so what type of spaces? They need to be spaces that can accommodate much of the awareness we've discussed that has happened during COVID about being able to, move freely and use, maybe at home there were soup cans, but now they're going to be dumbbells, and being able to have some guidance in doing that forward and welcoming them into these open spaces where they can work with a friend or meet new friends within the community, and just, if nothing else, feel that energizing effect of exercising closely with others, versus, again, a more traditional siloed approach of massive amounts of cardio, massive amounts of strength training equipment that doesn't necessarily change or bring us closer to what we believe the future opportunity is for engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of leads into a second question we just got. So is there a calculation recommended to determine the amount of treadmills, bikes, and ellipticals, like say the cardio pieces, if somebody is kind of filling out their facility floor?
Yeah, I'll just say this. I mean, the ratios keep changing, right? The balance when we're creating space, and we create spaces that are, of course, are larger than the movement focused spaces that we spent a lot of time in this presentation discussing the opportunity for. But we are seeing, as Andrew mentioned, a decrease clearly in cardiovascular, fixed position cardiovascular type equipment. How much so? I'd say, really, again, there's no perfect measurement of this, but we're seeing something in the area, on average, anecdotally, 5, even 10% of that cardiovascular equipment. That may not seem like a lot, but it's a massive shift in the industry. We experienced a much more significant and have experienced a much more significant shift on the strength training side of the industry, at least in terms of the single purpose selectorized equipment category, where you have a chest press or a pull down and things of that nature. Still very important items within any space, but The need for the redundancy of those pieces, the thinning out of those spaces has created a new opportunity to offer more open space. And when we talk about open spaces, we say in totality. So whether that's on your fitness floor or whether that includes your group exercise studios or an adjunct space for recovery, as we discussed, we believe that you're looking at a 25 to 30% commitment to those type of open movement oriented spaces in terms of the balance of your overall facility future forward.
Yeah, and kind of continuing on that theme of spaces and facilities, I know you touched on recovery in the presentation. How important is it to make space for recovery type spaces, and what are the most important aspects to consider?
Yeah, so the recovery aspect of a facility has become, again, it's almost become a staple at this point. People are looking for it. You can tell simply by the growth of our industry leaders like Hyperice and Therabody that people are interested in recovery. Your trainers and your fitness staff can tell you that it's been important forever. It's simply just becoming more of a trend. We want people to see it. It's an incentive for them to become part of your community. But we also want people to do it because it actually helps to keep our community healthy. So it's a win-win. I would say it's incredibly important, even to the point of having classes dedicated specifically to recovery. And it is still at this point slightly novel, so it does give you that extra variable that's going to incentivize new members and interest existing members, especially since you can implement those things quite easily at moderate to low costs.
Yeah, so speaking of cost, another really big topic, not only in the community industry, everywhere, is budget. So say that a facility doesn't have the budget for trainers or floor coaches all of the time. Are there design or technology integrations that can help guide the wide variety of user types that these community facilities support?
I can start in regards to digital guidance. Now, of course, I'm a proponent of hiring as many fitness professionals as you can, right? That's what keeps me employed. Thanks, Brian. But providing digital guidance, utilizing various platforms only helps to enhance that fitness professional's ability to provide service. And if you want to provide better service, you do not have to necessarily incur the cost of another fitness professional on your team. You can simply employ those different digital guidance techniques, utilize different space design techniques, and the fitness professionals who are already on staff will be able to provide an even better service. Brian?
Yeah, we're certainly not advocates for replacing live instruction with digital instruction, to be clear. We're interested in growing the pie. So if a facility is fortunate enough to have live instruction, let's say for group training, larger group training classes, even small group training classes, that's fantastic. We know that there's just a tremendous additional opportunity for those that don't engage in group training sessions or are still intimidated by that or want to kind of learn more on their own. And there's a couple ways to solve for that. So in the presentation, we showed a digital kiosk, again, an interaction where you'd have, let's say, all of the, tools, accoutrements, balls, bands, mats, things of that nature to utilize and have quick guidance on how you could get movements that support that, or even short format workouts. This is an example where somebody may not have the opportunity to engage in personal training or the finances to do so, but there's no reason why they can't have better guidance on the fitness floor versus roaming around trying to figure it out or pick up their phones and try to look at that or hold that or maybe put it over there on the ground and hope that somebody else doesn't step on it while they're going and doing these things. So we think that it's incumbent upon, the operator to solve for a lot of these needs forward. And then there are also opportunities where, the active TV system, for instance, that Andrew oversees within our organization is a fantastic subordination tool. What does that mean? That means that one could be teaching a class or a small or large, in a large, small or large area. And, not everybody has the ability to keep their eyes on the instructor at all times, depending upon the angle of the room or what have you. And usually the best of the coaches are really motivational, and you're listening to them intently. If you could be listening to them, but also have a great visual of somebody, a model, if you will, showing the movement, the correct format for that are one or more low-cost monitors within the space. That's an exceptional enhancement to that learning opportunity. And so that's where one of the ways we've been most successful, more as an augmentation of live coaching than a replacement for it, but also in a way to extend more guidance into areas that have no live touches today. That's where the digital, content or guidance can really pay dividends.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And one more budget question. So money's tight. Say a facility doesn't have the budget for a renovation or a revamp. Do you have suggestions for how they can rebalance what they've got currently?
Well, yeah, I mean, trade in a little of that cardio and strength, to be honest, create more space. It's more likely than not, I can tell you the vast majority of our clients that we are supporting in renovations and modernizations have probably too much equipment right now. So there is an opportunity to get value back on whatever the remaining useful life is of that equipment, and in essence, create more open space. And the cost of replacing functional, I can tell you dollar to dollar versus where, the cost of replacing a treadmill, for instance, is today is fractional. So, if you're able to thin out your spaces, create more open space, maybe simply just invest in, an appropriate floor covering for that space and utilize some of the existing accessory or tools you have, that would be a fantastic win for most spaces. And with any remaining budget, yes, freshen up your soft goods, your accessories, if you will, the handhelds that are going to be used in these spaces. These are areas to strongly consider. And then, yes, low-cost digital solutions. As we know, digital solutions in general can be lower cost, but a lot of the products today are really very affordable, low-cost, high-impact solutions, as we would refer to them as.
Great. Thank you for going into those topics more depthly. I don't see any more questions at this time, but anybody listening, if you have any more questions for Brian or Andrew, their contact information is right there. Feel free to reach out to them. Additionally, this webinar will be available on demand on the Community Rec website. So in case you want to revisit any of these topics or share with friends and colleagues, this will be available to you. So thank you again, Brian and Andrew. This was a wonderful and insightful presentation. Any last things to add before we wrap it up here?
Thank you.
No, thank you. Just remember that the functional equipment has incredible tangible value. By tangible, I mean it actually provides great outcomes, but simply having new and novel aspects to your facility is valuable to your member base as well. So these types of changes go a lot longer than you can imagine, or a lot further than you can imagine.
Yeah, I think the takeaway is as we welcome people back into the facility, or hopefully onboard new faces, give them something fresh to see, give them something that would be consistent with what they've learned during the last few years, that so much can be done with a bit of focus and guidance, and certainly everybody is starving, I believe, for more socialization and community. So good luck to everybody out there, and we look forward to seeing everything come back faster than ever.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all again, and thank you all for attending, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.